Let's talk about foreclosures. This has been a hot topic lately. I always like to say that headlines do more to terrify than clarify. And anytime I see something in the media that could be confusing or hard to understand, I want to make sure that I'm bringing you the education or the value you need to be able to understand what's really happening out there, because a lot of the media headlines can make people pause their plans or just downright get scared. So I'm going to start with this. Start here from a recent survey from NerdWallet. And it says here 67% of Americans say a housing market crash is imminent in the next 3 years. 67%. That is 2 out of 3 people that think that the housing market crash is coming. Now, if you follow the data like I do, you know that the data says differently. But why do people think that? It's because there's so much confusion out there around, and a lot of them stems from headlines like these. So I pulled these recent headlines about foreclosure data, and it says U.S. foreclosure filings surged 115% in 2022. U.S. foreclosure activity doubles annually but still below pre-pandemic levels. And then foreclosure filings rose 115% in the past year. Now, while all these are factually true, they don't tell the whole story, but they get people to read the articles and read the information because these headlines are alarming. These headlines will make you think the market is about to crash. So what I want to do is take the recent foreclosure data that these are pointing to and break that down to make sure we're all on the same page to understand what these headlines truly mean. So take a look here. This is a quote from Adam, a very trusted source that I follow. It says, Adam, a leading curator of real estate data nationwide for land and property data, today released its year-end 2022 U.S. foreclosure market report, which shows foreclosure filings, default notices, scheduled auctions, and bank repossessions were reported on 324,237 properties in 2022. That's up 115% from 2021. So that's what I showed you in those headlines, but down 34% from 2019 before the pandemic shook the market. That's what they didn't show in the headlines. Foreclosure filings in 2022 were also down 89% from the peak of nearly 2.9 in 2010. So much packed in here. And what you can see is that a lot of the media headlines will go right into the statistic that grabs attention, up 115%, just like what I did with the title for this video, because it grabs attention. But there's so much more to the story, and that's what I want to share with you today. And I think this next graph that I have really shows this visually. So let's break it down. So here's a look at U.S. foreclosure activity. It says it doubles annually, but still below pre-pandemic levels. So this is a look at U.S. properties with foreclosure filings, and it's going all the way back to 2005. And what you can see in these dark red bars, those were years where we had over 1 million foreclosure filings per year in the U.S. Now, if you think about this and you look at the data of how much foreclosures have increased over the past year, that's what the 115% was. But look over to the right-hand side, we went from nearly record level lows of foreclosures in 2020 and 2021 to up in 2022. That's the 115% increase. They more than doubled, no doubt. I said this on this channel. It was coming, but at the same time, if you look back in time as to what this means contextually, 324,000 foreclosures is nowhere near the millions and millions that were recorded when the housing market crashed during the mortgage meltdown. So we're in a very different period of time, a very different landscape for what's happening in the housing market. I'm going to break down all those reasons why we're in a different place today, but it's important to have the context as you look at the headlines to truly understand what they mean, because in 2010, we had 2.9 million foreclosure filings. Since then, we've had a much more qualified set of buyers. Far more people who are applying for mortgages now are able to really have really be able to pay those mortgages, better credit history, they have income qualification, things that weren't in play that caused the market to crash the last time. And so when you think about why people are concerned, 2 out of 3 people think that the housing market is going to crash. They look back in time and they remember, wait, what happened when the market crashed? They see foreclosures rising again and they think, here we go again. But again, the data looks very different. So let's check this out. So we actually had 1 million fewer foreclosures over the last 3 years than we did even compared to normal years. So let me show you what this means. Again, data from Adam. And if you look at 2017, 2018, and 2019, we averaged just under 600,000 foreclosure filings in the US. Now, I never want anyone to go through foreclosure by any means. But what we do know is that it happens every year here in the US. Unfortunate financial situations, family situations, things happen and people have to go through the foreclosure process. Now, if you look at the last 3 years, we had a very different scenario. We had the forbearance program. We had higher equity so people could sell their homes and avoid foreclosures. Banks and lenders did everything they could to avoid another catastrophe and made sure we were not going to end up in another foreclosure crisis again. And so over the past 3 years, we had record low foreclosures. So we're not even anywhere near even a normal year when it comes to foreclosure filings in this country. Now my heart goes out to the 324,000 people who last year had to go through this process. But what I'm not talking about here is epic proportions, where we have a housing market crash. So people think crash when they hear foreclosures rising, but what the data shows contextually is that we're in a very different place today. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's see why this is. This is a quote from Rick Sharga, and it says, 18 months after the end of the government's foreclosure moratorium, and with less than 5% of the 8.4 million borrowers who entered the CARES Act forbearance program remaining, foreclosure activity remains significantly lower than it was prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. It seems clear that the government and mortgage industry efforts during the pandemic, coupled with a strong economy, have helped prevent millions of unnecessary foreclosure. And that's the bottom line right there, is that we're talking about a very different experience. The forbearance program gave people time and space when they needed it to get back on their feet. The mortgage industry is doing everything they can to work with borrowers to keep them in their homes, and we've got a strong economy. So the equity that people have built up over time has given them the opportunity to sell their home versus go through a foreclosure process. So while we know that foreclosures are definitely rising, we're certainly not talking about crash levels because we're in a very different scenario. And I think this quote from Bill McBride says it very well. He's another expert that I follow, and he really saw the writing on the wall when the market crashed in 2008 and 2009. But here's what he's saying about today's market. This was a quote from just last month, mid-January. He said, "The bottom line is there will be an increase in foreclosures over the next year from record low levels. But there will not be a huge wave of distressed sales as happened the following housing bubble. The distressed sales during the housing bust led to cascading price declines, and that will not happen this time." So again, really important to have this context to understand why this is different and that we're not headed to a crash. The data just doesn't support it. Yes, it's true. It's increasing. Yes, it's true. That will continue to increase, but it's just not the same this time around. Hey, if you're thinking of buying or selling your Bay Area home, give us a call, a text, or an email. We'd love to help you out.